I'm glad Mike said that because good, he is in the back corner. Drilled into many of us from Steve LePan is recognizing the importance of that partnership. The Commission, DFO, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Lake Ontario fishery would not be what it is without the effort of those individuals. And so just wanted to echo what Mike said there as well. Coregonines, like I said before, was told we can do kind of some different stuff, and we've had a Coregonine working group that has been expertly led by Sarah Beach and Alex Gatch. They've done an amazing job at herding the cats to try to figure out 4 different species and all different things. And one of the charges is in there is to update both the LOC and the broader community on the status of bloater. And so instead of hitting all the species for this talk, we're just going to focus on bloater. And one of the most important pieces that I wanted to acknowledge right off the bat is the amazing set of co-authors that many of these folks work in all sorts of aspects of the culture surveys and the research projects, but really kind of acknowledge the effort of the culture staff. And it isn't a restoration without people out there sweeping tanks every day, taking care of fish. I think maybe fish went into the Genesee just the other day. Is that right? So looked like a windy day. Looked like they were doing a great job. Just want to make sure they're often not brought up in these talks, but the rest of the talks don't happen if somebody doesn't rear the fish, right? So again, a lot of people to acknowledge here. We'll just be hit on a bunch of different topics. I might have missed some folks. Apologies for that. But really, quick background, a native deep water species to Lake Ontario, an invertivore, a prey fish for native lake trout. That's what we have at least documented, as well, maybe some consumption of bloater. Sharp declines, I'm going to say in the mid 1900s, right? In the 1940s, it's reported thousands in gill nets. In the 1960s, 9. By the 80s and 70s, 1. And there hadn't been a bloater then, despite a bunch of the effort you've seen displayed out there until 2015. And the restoration stocking began in 2012 via Lake Michigan source gametes collected by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and commercial fishers out there. And they're out there. I know colleague Logoy says, I'm surprised you guys even catch any, right? It's a big lake, but a testament to what the culture staff has done. We do find them, and we want to show a little bit of that. So Tresca's always on me to keep the database updated, and as everybody else. And so we know there's maybe a few pieces missing from this, but right now I think we're around 2.9 million bloater stocked in Lake Ontario. A variety of different stages based somewhat on decisions and somewhat based on what we can do. That does exclude about 1.6 million eyed bloater embryos that we put out there in 2024 as well. To date, 31 captures. This map used to be really easy to go through because it wasn't that many, but it's starting to get a little bit more crowded. The gray dots, just to represent, there is sampling going on in these other places. Want to kind of show the zeros, the zero catches as well as the captures. The bloaters and trawls is what we had been capturing for about the past 10 years. As Dr. O'Malley alluded to, for the first time, bloater were caught in gill nets. And not just one survey, that's the survey he caught. It was a fun email to get from Sarah Beach when she said, hey guys, we caught 5 bloater yesterday in our community index netting at Rocky Point. And then in our juvenile salmonid survey that I was talking about, Connerton caught one of those bigger species off the DEC boat. So does appear to be maybe more southern shore oriented. There's always kind of a caveat that there's a little bit of space here where it's tough to trawl and rocky. So we might be missing those fish because we're not using our gears there, but there's gill netting happening there as well. So maybe we can assume it's a pretty good representation of the distribution of bloater in Lake Ontario. As I mentioned, 2025 was the most bloater captured ever. We almost doubled the total before. 11 were caught, and that's mostly because of these gillnet fish. 5 in community index, the 1 in the adult lake trout survey, and 1 in juvenile salmonid. A lot larger sizes to those than what we typically catch in our trawls. Asterisks there. The survey teams and the samples ship stuff out, and Amanda and her entire team work quickly to get our 1 or 2 samples. She's running hundreds and thousands of samples, and she says, yeah, I can get your 1 or 2 samples in there. And so we actually get to confirm what these species are. So we're very thankful for that, because we don't usually trust ourselves with our field identifications, but they say we're getting better. So that's good. But another piece that's interesting is we typically, I say, yeah, if we're in bloater water, 60 to 120 meters, that's where we're going to catch them. When we were out there in our September work, we actually did catch them right up and in and under the thermocline. So that's some of the first time we've seen them using habitats not in bloater water, whatever that is. You just heard me talk about biomass and density and trying to present things in those units. Just got to be careful. There's a lot of zeros on this side because there's not many out there, but what we see is a slightly increasing trend in 3 different versions of our surveys. The spring survey and the fall survey, and then since we've taken the fall survey to a whole lake perspective, just want to see if that's a similar trend. And it is. Now, for context, what does a kilogram per hectare, of 0.001, how is that referenced? Well, Ralph's data and Daryl's papers show in Lake Michigan in 2024, somewhere around 1 to 5 kilograms per hectare, depending on which survey you're looking at, or in Lake Huron, 4 to 5 kilograms per hectare. So we're a few orders of magnitude off, but we're on the graph. And with other context, alewife in that year, 78 kilograms per hectare in Lake Ontario, right? So just to understand the system of kind of what we're looking for, a silvery fish in bags of other silvery fish. I'm sure we missed some. I know I missed some. The other guys are probably better. So to date, we don't have any evidence of natural reproduction. All the fish that we've been able to observe that should have a mark on the otoliths have. We're a little slow on that, so there's some fish that need to be double checked. But Dr. O'Malley and crew in 2024 went out and applied every manner of larval sampler that anybody had used in Michigan and tried to look all over at the times when we should catch bloater. In fact, we released a whole lot of bloater here that day, and we didn't even catch them, which was a little bit of a surprise, but we don't have evidence. Doesn't say they aren't, but we don't have evidence currently that there's any natural reproduction occurring. So recapping, stocking, important to recognize what the team up in White Lake has done for years as being the most prolific brood source, but that program is sunsetting along its sort of scheduled plan. And that's actually putting a lot of new responsibility on the service folks at Lamar and Allegheny. So they're stepping up and cranking fish out. 31 recaptures to date, 11 and 25 resulted from those 7 larger bloater caught in gill nets. That's the first time that we think we have fish of the size or enough fish of the size to recruit to those smaller mesh sizes. Density is increasing, but certainly 3 orders of magnitude lower than the lakes, Michigan or Huron. And again, limited, but thorough, at least in 1 year, sampling for larvae has not detected any evidence. There's a lot of different areas of bloater research going on. Parented-based tagging being led by Meredith Bartran. Some really interesting barotrauma work being led by Drs. Owen Gorman and Tim Johnson. I had to pick kind of 2 that I thought I could focus on and get through. So one is sort of the post-stocking survival aspect, which we sort of have a more thorough story and understanding of. And then the other is thinking about spawning habitat, where I won't call it thorough, but we're working on it and trying to get things figured out. So some of the first work that really helped us understand just how many of these fish are surviving when we're out there is Natalie Clenard's work from 2020, survival of about 42% after 12 days. And people say low survival. Stock fish don't always survive, right? You've seen that in some other fish, but these sort of tend to be higher. Lydia Pollock and team put out a paper just recently that showed survival was very similar. One of the neat things that they did is actually showed survival by release depth and showed that the fishes that were released shallower tended to die potentially more from predation than those released out deeper. The deeper fish didn't all survive, but there wasn't as obvious a predation element there. So really helping to try to dial in releases. The problem is we don't have barges to take the fish out anymore. So this early survival issues is something that kind of made us want to do what others have done with all the Chinook salmon and coho and think about how environmental conditioning might help. And so we luckily had some like surplus fish that needed to go out. We developed a study to do a truck to tank transfer and release and a barge release. So we did this in 2023. Alex and I created some designs to do offshore net pens. People are like, you're crazy. You're like, yeah, maybe. Let's see if it works. It worked, but it showed us that same thing where even in the net pens where there was no predation, no barotrauma, we had exceptionally low survival. The survival when we handled the fish more was lower than if we just took them right from the truck and put them in. Yes, we did it when it was too warm with too many currents, our first attempt at it. In fact, this gives you some idea of an ROV image as we move up the net. This was the better survival. And so our methods that we thought we could estimate survival didn't work. So we're end up kind of quantifying the number we see along the sides and extrapolating. They're rough estimates, but they help get us to some understanding. The other neat thing, Dimitri, Gorski, Kyle Morton also penned fish. We penned fish that had acoustic tags and then also direct released some acoustic tagged fish. Similar 63 to 77% survival initially. But again, these fish were in the net pen. They weren't predated. They weren't dropping too deep. They couldn't go anywhere. They simply weren't making it. And so there is some evidence, although not significant, that these conditioned pen fish experienced higher survival than the direct release fish. Please reach out to Kyle for more info than that. So in that absence of predation, what do we think is happening with handling stress? This is a project Alex Gatch took on using blood plasma cortisol concentrations and evaluating a couple different treatments to see how it would work, to see if it affected the fish. Next couple graphs, you'll see cortisol or survival on the y-axis and time on the x. How about day of night? They seem to be more calm at night. Maybe their stress doesn't go up. If we transport them then, that didn't work. Stress definitely increases, but the time of day didn't matter. Tank temperature, in our heads, we've been always thinking colder is better. Didn't necessarily play out the way we thought. Colder actually increased stress at periods of 4 hours and 48 hours, but there was no significant difference in survival, and survival was actually pretty high. Handling method, some folks use, Roger Gordon uses fish pumps to move Cisco. We were told, let's try that. So the problem here was our fish pump stress levels were higher than our fish that were netted and moved around, but the netted fish did increase more than the pump. But again, survival wasn't that different. So recapping that survival, telemetry has been showing us consistent results, but the 100-meter release depth might be a good place. Environmental conditioning might increase survival. It was logistically difficult / nightmare. But those large bloater that we caught in all the gill nets would be about the size that the fish that went in the net pen were. So they were double marked. They do have a unique mark. We want to double check to see if that might have been those fish. Controlled lab experiments do not necessarily support that the stress by itself right now is causing those low SOC survival rates we're seeing in the lake. Where did Lake Michigan spawn? Or excuse, where did Lake Bloater spawn in Lake Michigan? This was a question that we asked folks there and really tried to figure out, and it's not well understood. A commercial fisherman said, try out here in the Mid-Lake Reef Complex. So Alex and colleagues from the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee have been working out there to try to look for bloater using acoustics and ROVs. They haven't found any, but they found some really interesting thing about whitefish out there, around the mid-lake reefs. They've tried deeper where they saw bloater-sized targets, and they see these clay ridges. And when they actually put the ROV down and collected some sculpin, they genetically confirmed bloater eggs in them, but haven't quite gotten that sort of smoking gun of where the habitats are in Lake Michigan that we can then compare to Lake Ontario. Dr. Nikki Berry is working on pulling our different substrates up out of Lake Ontario and figuring out how incubation survival might change. Her initial results, mussel hash, have incredibly low survival. Lots of caveats, and this is some of her initial work, redoing a bunch of it, but a lot of the lake bottom is mussel hash or silt. So, recapping the spawning habitat element, logistically difficult, some successes, more planned. We're actually really excited to talk to folks in Lake Superior about their success that they've had up there. Might be another place we can go to learn this. Substrates might be suitable, but dracaenids could be a problem. And this is the one I left, and I thought maybe I'll just leave this instead of questions to our esteemed LOC board. What is the future of the Lake Ontario bloater restoration? So with that, I hope I have a few minutes for questions.